everyone, and welcome back. Today, I am interviewing Rivera Sun, an amazing author and activist. She has written a lot of wonderful books, including The Dandelion, Insurrection, and my favorite, The Way Between. She is the editor of Nonviolence News, and she leads workshops on nonviolence. She is also very active in Pace Bene and currently teaching nonviolence classes that you can join. I have been in one of them, and then I'm currently in another. And I highly recommend it. It's very enriching and helpful. And I will provide a link below so that hopefully you can join. Rivera, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Rosie, and for doing this series of interviews.
Sure thing. So, Rivera, one thing that I really love about your books is that you have so many for young people. When I was growing up and reading a lot of literature, there were many options, but there weren't a lot with a central message of nonviolence. What inspired you to begin writing these books?
Yeah, like you, Rosie, when I was growing up, there was an increasing number of novels for young people that particularly centered strong female leads, but they were almost always violent warriors, right? But simultaneously, when I was growing up, we also saw things like the collapse of the Soviet Union through nonviolent struggles, or the people power revolution happened when I was a very young person. And, we've seen just exponential rise of nonviolent struggle around the world. And when I looked at my twin sisters, niece, and nephews, I realized, what are they going to read? What they have to read are things like the Hunger Games or Harry Potter or the Jackson series, all of which are really fun to read, right? Like, no one's knocking them, but they also assume that violence is the only or best solution to the conflicts that the characters find themselves in. But in our real world, we're discovering that that's not actually the case, that nonviolence is working twice as often as violence. So why don't we update our literature and weave in things like boycotts, strikes, blockades, occupations, protests, active bystander training, peace team skills into the very heroics of the characters in the story. And that's what I've set out to do with The Way Between and the other books in the series, is really say to the fantasy genre, we can update our literature. We don't have to assume that violence is the only exciting or interesting thing that can go into these plots.
Oh, thank you, Rivera. That's so good. And I've really been enjoying your book, The Way Between, and I'm just so grateful. I also think it's cool that you're a twin because I'm a twin too. So that's awesome. And so I would love to talk about what I'm currently reading your book, The Way Between. My favorite character is Ariara. Can you tell me a little bit about how you came up with that character?
Yeah, so Ariara is one of those almost classic fantasy characters where she's very strong, she's very strong-willed, she's very independent, and these are qualities that we want to support in our young people, right? And I was very interested in what would happen if you take a very independent-willed young girl who's been mostly in charge of raising herself and have her be an apprentice to a warrior, but not in warring, not in violence, but in actually the thing that old warrior has never gotten to teach, or rarely gotten to teach, which is the way between, which in the book is a physical Aikido-esque form of martial art or non-martial art. And it's also an inner practice that is maybe more familiar to some of us as what we would call nonviolence or peace building. So yeah, I just always love to write about strong characters, and I love to put those strong characters into really tricky conflicts and have them find their way out using the whole toolbox and canon that we call nonviolence.
Oh, thanks, Rivera. And also, I want to remind you guys, Rivera did a series of videos with Daniel Lee on the toolbox and everything that you can use in nonviolence right now and what's going on right now. So I will provide links for those below if you want to take a look at them. They're excellent. And Rivera, I would love to ask also, you've studied nonviolence so much and you teach about it, and so I would like to know some of your reflections on what does nonviolence mean to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like nonviolence is a very large and forgiving word that, it masquerades under a lot of other names, and it also encompasses a lot of things that have other names within it. So it's very gracious to all of us in that way. Thank you. For me, the word nonviolence, well, Gandhi didn't invent nonviolence, but Gandhi did give us our English word nonviolence, which is almost a direct translation of ahimsa. And himsa means harm, and the A before it is the negation of harm. But it doesn't just mean the absence of harm, it means the presence of all the things that are non harming. Things like song, dance, music, celebration, love, respect, dignity, fairness, justice. And similarly, for me, nonviolence is not just the negation of or the absence of physical violence, it's the presence of structural nonviolence, systemic nonviolence, cultural nonviolence, certainly physical nonviolence. But I really want to emphasize, for me, it's not about just not having violence. It's about filling up that void with all of the things that not only are nonviolent in nature, but they foster further nonviolence in us and our world. And so for me, it's a very large term. But I tend to work with specifically the piece of it that is often referred to as nonviolent action, in which case we're talking about campaigns and movements for change and over 300 different methods of using nonviolent types of actions, things we mentioned earlier, including boycotts and blockades, and then also things we haven't mentioned like sit-ins or wade-ins or walkouts and lightning strikes, civil disobedience, of course, and with 300 different tactics, we could go on for quite some time. For me, nonviolence is the creativity that we unleash within ourselves when we take a firm stance for ourselves and say, I'm not going to engage in violence any longer. What other options are before me? And when we really get curious about that question, we find out that actually we have a ton of options.
Oh, thank you, Rivera. Well, I would like to just say thank you for being here today. It was an honor for me to interview you, and I'm grateful that you took the time. Thank you so much. And I would like to encourage everyone who's watching to read Rivera's books, check out her website, and consider joining a Pache Bene class. I will provide links below so that you can check all of that out. Thank you, Rivera.
Yeah, thank you, Rosie.
Mm-hmm.